And it's fitting that our next speaker was a very successful part of the Great Give. You know, I'm going to introduce Eugene more formally in a minute, but I don't know if we would have raised over $200,000 in the Valley if it weren't for a special thing that Eugene does every year at the Valley Indy. He's literally almost online for 36 hours, interviewing our Valley nonprofits and elected officials to encourage people to give. And as I said, it was $200,000 for Valley nonprofits, but Eugene himself and the Valley Indy raised over $16,000. So congratulations, Eugene. I think most of you have either met Eugene, seen his podcast, or read his stories, so he's no stranger to us. But he's an award-winning journalist, and he's been the editor and reporter for the Valley Independent Sentinel for more than 13 years now. Before that, he was a reporter and editor for the Danbury News-Times and an online producer for the Hartford Courant. I'm not sure most people in this room know that the Valley Indy and the online journalism project got their start in 2009 thanks to a $450,000 Knight Foundation grant supported by TCF and VCF, not just for the Valley Independent Sentinel, but also for the New Haven Independent. Back then, I had the honor of serving on the board of directors for the online journalism project, so I got to see this from the very beginning. When newspapers all around us were folding or cutting back, merging, and just outright closing, the online journalism project and Valley Indy were there to save the day for us. And it's safe to say, without the Valley Indy and Eugene, much of our local stories would never get told. So please welcome the editor and reporter for the Valley Independent Sentinel and a good friend and neighbor of mine, Eugene Driscoll.
Thank you, Jack. That's right, Derby is representing tonight so far. I live on Hawthorne Avenue. Thanks again to Mr. Walsh. I don't feel like I've earned the right to call him Jack yet, and good evening, everybody. As Mr. Walsh just said, I'm the full-time reporter and editor for the Valley Independent Sentinel, also known as valleyindy.org. Go ahead and look us up at, valleyindy.org. The Valley Indy. I don't usually speak like this. It's a little different for me. The Valley Indy is part of the Online Journalism Project. That's a trailblazing nonprofit operated by Mr. Paul Bass of New Haven, also publishes the aforementioned New Haven Independent. Paul is the publisher, essentially my boss, and manages the finances of the organization. However, specifically at the Valley Indy, I do everything else. I was very pleased and humbled when Sharon called and asked me to speak here tonight at this gathering. I get to talk about how the Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven work with the Online Journalism Project and the Valley Indy specifically. To put it bluntly, the Valley Independent Sentinel would not exist if it wasn't for the support of the VCF, the TCF, and funders like people in this room right now, so thank you. I've worked for the Online Journalism Project since April 2009, but the VCF's partnership with OJP predates me. The VCF support continues until this very day. Last year, the Valley Indy received a $160,000 multi-year general operating grant from the VCF. We are in the second year of this 3-year grant, and because it's unrestricted, we can use it where it's needed the most. If it was not for the Valley Community Foundation, my position would not exist at this publication. When I was hired by the Online Journalism Project, I lived in Derby, like I said, and I still do, Hawthorne Avenue. If my son's watching on Facebook, do your homework. But I say that because living in the coverage area was a requirement to work at the Valley Indy. That's unusual in the media business. To me, it was a sign of the mission It was a sign of what they were hoping to accomplish, and it showed integrity. It played a part in my decision to take the job, launch the Valley Indie, leave a career at a daily newspaper where things were going fine. I had just been promoted. Now, so much has changed in the daily reporting industry since I entered the field exactly 24 years ago tomorrow. Much of it has to do with digital media, Facebook, Twitter, disappearing revenue streams, increased competition, bad owners, good owners, corporate consolidation. You name it, they've thrown it at us. But if you live in the Naugatuck Valley and you remember the Evening Sentinel's demise, or you heard about how that happened, you know the trends of this industry, particularly when it comes to daily community news reporting. 60 Minutes just did a story on it a few weeks ago. If you haven't seen that, I suggest you seek it out. It was good and truth. Daily community reporting is the type of reporting that I do at the Valley Indie. It's the type of reporting that is disappearing in this country. The old ways of funding small local media outlets are gone. They're not coming back, especially in communities where people are struggling to make ends meet. The economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic has only made a bad situation worse. At least 30 newspapers closed or merged in April and May of 2020 alone. Revenue at newspapers fell 42% when COVID arrived in this country. It brings me no joy to report that. I love newspapers. I subscribe to newspapers, local papers. I'm sure you all do too. I met my wife at a newspaper where we both work, so it literally has a place in my heart. But the facts are the facts. The demise of the Evening Sentinel showed the Valley was unfortunately well ahead of a trend when it comes to media outlets closing. But thanks to the Valley Community Foundation, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and again, people like you in this room right now, the Valley has been on the cutting edge of a new, much more positive trend. And that's the growth of nonprofit online news outlets doing old-fashioned community journalism. There is hope because the continued support from the VCF has allowed the Valley Indie to manage operating costs, keep a reporter employed, support a freelance writer, and to keep the news flowing. The result? I'm almost done. 1,500 stories from Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour in the past 12 months. Thank you. 500 press releases, announcements talking about what our local nonprofits are doing in the Naugatuck Valley. 21 hours of live streams during the recent Great Give. Hundreds of hours of podcast interviews going back to 2011 when ain't nobody was doing podcasts. Municipal voting guides for Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour. One of the handful of news outlets in the entire state of Connecticut to get a grant from Facebook to bolster our COVID-19 coverage in the very beginning of the pandemic. Mayoral debates, first selectman debates, live Q&As with elected officials, more than 30 awards from the Society of Professional Journalists, including first place wins for general reporting, breaking news, investigations, and audio storytelling. Again, the podcast. And that's because of everybody here. So the Valley Community Foundation is nurturing the soul of a type of journalism that is in trouble. Now, is the Valley Indie perfect? No way, look at me. Do I make mistakes? Absolutely. Are we smaller than we once were? Yes. Do we miss stories? Yes, on a daily basis. Do I own a suit? No, not one that fits. But the Valley Indie was launched with the simple belief that the communities in the lower Naugatuck Valley deserve the complete and undivided attention of a single media outlet, an outlet that lives and breathes in the communities with you. Thank you. Because at the end of the day, an informed community is a stronger community. That's the mission. And thanks to the Valley Community Foundation's funding, the Valley has a news outlet that is not under pressure to, quote, get clicks. I don't care about that. Instead, the pressure is to produce professional, locally reported news that is becoming increasingly tough to get in our country. So here I am, last page, living testimony to the VCF's positive impact on our Valley. If I had to write a headline about my presentation here tonight, it would read, VCF saves local journalism. And that is the truth. So thank you for all of your support of the Valley Community Foundation. Thank you for your support of the Valley Independent Sentinel, and have a great night.